both LSD and magic mushrooms. I did like 6 or 7 trips in like a few month period. A couple of those experiences were truly shattered the framework that I had on reality. I could no longer think about reality the same way I could anymore. This identity, this Wyeth identity, kind of fell away. It didn't exist anymore. At the end of the day, like that experience, like it assured me that like I'm not just this right here. I'm actually one with everything, and I should be trying to love everything as much as I love myself. And although it sounds very cliche, it's that love is truly everything. Like, if you love as much as you possibly can in this life, then you live your life to the fullest.
You're listening to Conscious Conversations, a personal and spiritual growth podcast to help you become your fullest expression. Enjoy.
Hi everybody. Hi, my name is Marco Jack, your host and the founder of Divicati. Welcome to the 18th episode of Conscious Conversation, a podcast for growth-oriented and mission-driven divine beings. This is a space where we host high vibrational conversations with the intent to help you become the fullest expression of yourself. Each episode will dive deep into rabbit holes and always end with at least one big action step to help you apply to help optimize your life, mind, body, or soul, and leave the podcast feeling inspired, awakened, and empowered. Our broader mission, why we do this at Divicati, is to co-create a 5D world by harnessing the collective intention and collaboration. So I'm super glad that you can join us today. In this episode, I'm super excited to have Wyeth Austin with us. He's the founder of the Curious Minds YouTube channel. He creates YouTube videos on interesting spiritual subjects such as psychedelics, conscious work, ego, and spiral dynamics. Wyeth started his channel in 2019 and has accrued over 2 million views and 30,000 subscribers. Wyeth lives with the mission to attain full enlightenment and raise the collective consciousness of humanity as much as possible. So I'm super glad to have another spiritual brother today on this show to just dive deep into spiral dynamics, psychedelics, and consciousness work. So thank you so much for being in the space with me today.
Awesome, dude. I'm really super glad to be here. When you hit me up, I was like, I'm super down to do a podcast. I checked out some of your stuff. It was very interesting, definitely my type of stuff. So I'm super glad to be here. Super glad to hit me up. Yeah.
Nice, man. So can you just tell a little bit to the audience, like how did you start in your spiritual journey? Because from your bio, you said you started, you had like a spiritual enlightenment, awakening at 19. So can you just tell us a little story how that happened and what kind of led you to that path?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I've just always been very interested, even since I was a little kid, into like just like the nature of reality and stuff. Like I'd always like wonder about like the universe, about like space and all that stuff. I was like super interested in like science and that. I remember I was like super fascinated by like the movie Interstellar. I don't know if you've seen that movie. That's a super interesting movie. But I've just always been interested in just like reality and that sort of stuff. And then when I was like 18, almost 19, I heard about like psychedelics and all like people's stories about that, like having experiences like without an ego, like moving beyond the ego. And I started to learn a little bit about Buddhism as well. Actually always been a little bit interested in Buddhism since I was like 15 or 16. I just thought it was just a very practical, like sort of practice. And then I finally like took a psychedelic trip because, being like the curious person that I am, hearing all these stories and stuff about people having positive experiences that truly changed their life for the better. So I decided to try, I think I tried LSD for the first time. That was the first one I ever did. And that first trip, I don't remember exactly what happened, but I did like a series of like 6 trips with LSD, both LSD and magic mushrooms. I did like 6 or 7 trips in like a few month period. And a couple of those experiences were truly shattered the framework that I had on reality. I could no longer think about reality the same way I could anymore. And it was beyond anything I ever learned in like school or beyond anything that I could explain with like some scientific thing. And so probably the most two powerful experiences that I had in that series of trips was like two very powerful ego deaths where it felt like, well, this identity, this Wyeth identity kind of fell away. It didn't exist anymore. And in that headspace, like I had no memory of being a human. I had um, forgotten pretty much everything about like this normal reality that we live in. And it felt like the dissolving of this identity, it gave way into a kind of like infinite, I don't want to say like infinite identity, but there was no like self anymore. And it's felt like my sense of self expanded beyond this body and expanded to like everywhere in the entire universe. It was kind of like, um, it's like, I don't know, kind of like, it's kind of like the Big Bang kind of, it's weird. Like, like I became like the Big Bang and I exploded and like my being exploded everywhere across the entire universe. That's what it felt like. And ever since then, I've gotten very into spirituality. It completely shattered everything I knew about reality because it's such a mind-blowing experience. It's like what the hell, man?
Right.
I like nothing could ever explain that. And then I, started uh, looking at other creators, hearing other people's stories, and people have had very similar experiences to mine. And I guess the biggest thing that I took away, practical from that trip, and like trying to embody that into my everyday life, is just be more selfless. Like, don't be so selfish anymore, because the selfishness, the strong identification with this identity, with this form, at the end of the day, like that experience, like it assured me that like I'm not just this right here. I'm actually one with everything, and I should be trying to love everything as much as I love myself. So I should be seeing others just as much as I, love others just as much as I love myself. And I try to embody that more and more. And it's a true struggle to do that because we all have our, attachments to, various things like, I don't know, sex or money and stuff like that. We also have like attachments to like our concepts that we believe about ourselves. Like, I'm a good basketball player. I'm a good whatever. And if like you feel like pain if you or feel like you're losing that identity that you cling to. So they're kind of like things like that. They're kind of like tether you to like this identity, this ego. And I think what I'm trying to do in my journey is try to break that down as much as possible. So I'm not so selfish anymore, and I can act out of love a lot more and do something that's truly going to help the world. It's not just for pleasure of my own self. Yeah, so that's really what those psychedelic trips did for me. When I took like 7 trips in the 3-month period, it was a lot to handle. When I came back down from that, it was extremely difficult to cope with. I remember I was like really depressed for like 2 weeks because it's just so much to handle. It was just way too much to handle. It's like my ego is kind of going through like backlashes, and I was like, I wish I never did this. I wish I never did this. It's so difficult to integrate this. But that kind of passed away, and haven't really done much psychedelics at all since then. It's just really been about integration for me. I've read a bunch of books. I've read some Eckhart Tolle. I've read some other books by an enlightened master named Peter Ralston. He writes books all about like ego mechanisms and stuff like that, and how the ego can just kind of trap you in life, stuff like that. And I've learned a lot about enlightenment and just that's like enlightenment in Buddhism, enlightenment like because there's a lot of different definitions of enlightenment. What I've kind of learned with that is that there's not just like one single thing called enlightenment. It's like there's variations of it, and ultimately my goal in life is to kind of get into that enlightened state and embody it 24/7, which I'm very, very far from doing. and I have a lot of shit to do in my life right now, kind of get my career started. So that'll probably be down the road more. But ultimately, what I'm trying to do right now is set myself up with in my life to have a career that's truly going to make a difference in humanity, truly going to raise people's consciousness. And I'm not sure exactly what that's going to be,
Hmm.
but I do have the YouTube channel right now. I don't make a whole lot of money from that. If I'm ever going to do that full time, I'm going to have to get a lot more viewers, a lot more subscribers, which I don't even really view that as ever being a full time thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I truly want to do something that's just going to help. And because what makes me fulfilled is just helping people and seeing people just kind of see past their own ego. Because I have like helped a lot of my friends in like their relationships and stuff.
Hmm.
They come to me and they talk to me about their relationships, and a lot of the time, like I know there's like some ego mechanism behind it that's leading to so much of their suffering, and I point that out to them, and it helps them, and that makes me really happy. So I want to do something along those lines of just kind of making people more aware of their ego and helping people move past that. So I'm actually in college right now. I am going to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and I'm studying psychology. And something that I am thinking about maybe doing one day, become like a therapist or like a life coach to help people with that. Uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, but I don't know exactly. Like, I don't know exactly if I'm going to do that. Like, it's like my life purpose path. It's like I'm not exactly sure what exactly it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be. I have like 3, 4 ideas in mind,
Right.
and if the channel blows up, that's one thing. The therapist thing is another. I also like want to write books one day.
Mm-hmm.
Once to get more life experience. So there's like multiple different options, but I'm not tripping too hard on it right now. And I know like generally the area that I want to get into and how to help people, but
Right.
yeah,
Like you're very clear on the why, but then perhaps the
yeah.
how and the what. It's like that golden circle. I'm not sure if you've come across that
Oh
framework
yes, I know
before.
what you're talking about. Yeah,
Yeah.
my why is very strong.
Very
Just the
strong.
how.
Yeah.
There's like 3 to 5 different things that I'm thinking about, but it's good to get the why first. You need the why first before you can go over to the how.
Yeah. No, I feel you, brother, because like that's
Yeah,
where I am right now in my
yeah,
life. Like kind of like,
mhm.
I believe you're 20. I
Yeah. I'm
just
20.
you're 20, and then like I just turned 23. I'm still trying to
Mhm.
find what it is
Yeah.
like for my career and how that's defined.
Mhm.
And so far I've learned is like to operate within our zone of genius and to
Mhm.
operate utilizing all of our strengths. Because I was actually a life coach
Mhm.
after
Nice.
college. That's what I've kind of focused on, purpose
Mhm.
coaching and all that. I like
Yeah.
the line of work that I do, but it doesn't utilize all my strength and skill sets, which is
Yeah.
more in the like the product management, more in like the entrepreneurial kind of route. So like
Mhm.
that's where I'm kind of stepping in for the last month or two, and I feel like, oh my goodness, like I feel even I'm uh, able to create even more value because I'm operating in the zone of genius. So that's just a little tangent there.
Nice.
Yeah, but I want to ask, right, because a lot of the viewers that are listening to this are more like I'm trying to target people like a little bit younger,
Mhm.
like maybe
Yeah.
25, 20 to like 30s, that kind of range.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you get this, when you talk to people, it's like, "Oh, how old are you? You're only 20?" Like, I can't believe like you have this kind of mindset. Like,
Yeah.
you're so much you're so ahead of like so many people. Perhaps you're an old soul like inside, right?
Mhm.
So I'm just curious, like when you first of all, like within your circle of friends, are there people that are like kind of on this path with you? Because sometimes spirituality could be like very lonely, as you mentioned in your channel before. So like I'm just kind of curious to know those kind of stories, like how you're able to elevate kind of like the people around you, or people are able to elevate within, like also help you elevate like the masterminds or and things
Mhm.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so my friend, like for me, I actually don't have any spiritual friends in my real life. I've met some people online, like 3 people online that I talk to regularly, but in like my personal life, I don't right now. Um, for the past 2 years, I've actually gone to community college, and now it's been like all online with COVID, so I haven't been able to like meet anyone new,
Mm.
sadly. But because that's I've been going through this whole like awakening journey for the past 2 years, so I haven't really been able to meet anyone new. But yeah, so I don't have like any spiritual friends in real life, but I do. I have found some like online, and I have like groups with them, like text groups with them. I text them like every day, and yeah. But like my friends know about like my whole like journey and stuff, and like I talk about it a little bit with them, but like not too much. But yeah,
Okay, I see.
yeah.
And how do you like meet these like spiritual friends? Because I feel like that's something that a lot of
Mhm.
people are kind of longing for, perhaps.
So this one guy I found, he actually like hit me up on Instagram because he knew about my channel, and now like I talk to him all the time.
Yeah.
Another like the other three people I found like the actualize.org forum. I don't know if you know
Oh,
who actually.
Leo, man, Leo Gura, yeah, hell
Yeah,
yeah.
I found them on the actualize.org forum, and yeah, and then I hope when I move to San Luis Obispo in 2 months, I hope there's like a meditation club or something like that, or some like spirituality club that I
Mm,
can join and meet people. So I'm hoping for something like that.
nice, nice.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Leo.
Yep.
Yeah, you dive. I'm sure like you watch a lot of his videos, kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, I do. He helped me more than anyone on my like spiritual journey. Like I found him like right after I had like the initial like awakening with the psychedelics. I started watching him shortly after that. He's
Right.
helped me so much. It's amazing.
Yeah, like have you watched his recent stuff lately? Because like I feel like he's really like into like some really advanced concept that I haven't even like had the time to
Yeah.
even understand.
I watch like most of his videos.
Okay.
But he's like super like he's dedicated his whole life to this stuff. Like that's all he does, and you can tell he's like super advanced with it. Um, like way more advanced than like me. So a lot of some of the stuff he says I don't like understand fully, but he helps me a lot, way more than anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome, brother. So I kind of want to dive deep into like the meat of this conversation a little bit, like
Mhm.
which is like kind of maybe we can start off on the ego side because you
Mhm.
kind of like it kind of like came up organically. So you took the psychedelics, right? And
Mhm.
I think you took like one crazy dose, which is like 600
Yeah.
UG, right? And then you even had a low
Yeah,
brownie.
my most craziest one was like 7.5 grams of magic mushrooms.
Okay, that
Yeah.
that was the craziest
That
one,
was
right?
like the craziest one for me. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe tell the listeners like a little bit about like maybe I guess because you talk a lot about the benefits. Like a lot of people have like preconception notions about like, oh,
Yeah.
this is like a drug. Can you just talk
Yeah.
a little bit about like why you took it? Like I personally have
Mhm.
experience with LSD as well as mushrooms, so I could say it helped me kind of tap in my subconsciousness a lot and kind of
Mhm.
on like it's for me. I think the first step in spiritual and personal growth is all about like purging, letting things from the past go, so that you're in
Yeah.
a fresh state that you can like kind of
Mhm.
think like have good energy to manifest
Mhm.
the future. But for your perspective, like why do you take it, and a little bit about the fundamentals of like, perhaps like psychedelics.
So the first time I ever took it was just like I started researching about them, and I think I read a book called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan,
Mm,
and in that book he basically like exposes like the United States government for like why like they actually made psychedelics illegal in the first place, which is kind of like to shut up the hippies because they were like very against the Vietnam War, and the United States government was very they were trying to like get rid of any anti-war agenda, and like the hippies the LSD was like a symbol for the hippies, and they banned LSD and made it like a Schedule One drug, which basically says that there is no medicinal or therapeutic benefit, and it has a high potential to be abused. And all of those three criteria, they're completely false for like any psychedelic. Um, they have a very low potential for addiction. I actually have never heard of anyone in my life be addicted to psychedelics. Um, there's been countless studies that have shown the medicinal and therapeutic benefits of psychedelics, and there's like this graph that says how many like research articles there was regarding psychedelics, and like in the 1950s and 60s it was like sky high, and then like it shows like the 1970s 80s and it was like all-time low because the government shut down all the research for them. And then recently in like in the 21st century, it's been like they say it's like the psychedelic renaissance.
mm.
So there's been like an influx of research, and now you know a lot more people are being opened up to the benefits. I saw a statistic. It said like 600,000 people each year, like new people try psychedelics. 600,000 people each year,
Oh wow.
and Yeah, so this guy Michael Pollan, he's like a journalist. He wrote like a whole book about all the benefits of it, the neuroscience behind it, the history of it as well, and he basically kind of he exposes like this their stigma around these substances should not be what they are, because most people just be like, oh, drug, bad, and Michael, that this book says, it's like this is not what it is. This is not the reality. People have their lives changed for the better because of these substances. People's depression get cured after just like one or two uses of this. You have to use it properly. Set and setting is very important,
Mm,
but the stories of people's depression, people's anxieties, people with PTSD who have that like completely eradicated, or at least it lessens to a significant degree. And also, you know it helps people who have like treatment resistant disorders as well. So like the whatever they use, what's it called, the antidepressants, which is
mm,
what a lot of people with like depression are on. A lot of people, that doesn't work for a lot of people.
mm.
And what's shown is that psychedelics, when used safely and properly, right intention, right setting, it can help people with that treatment resistant as well. And then there's also like the microdosing community who take like trace amounts of a psychedelic every day, and it goes a long way in increasing their mood, alleviating their stress, all that sort of stuff. It also makes them more productive as well, makes them more just like alive and lively. But that's not to say that you can't like have a bad experience, like something can't go wrong. But in general, if you have the right intention, you have the right you have the right setting, the odds are you will have like a very probably a positive experience. Maybe it will be like in the form of like a difficult experience, like a bad trip, where like you experience like stress, experience pain, but ultimately it'll show you like your blind spots. It'll show you what's the cause of your suffering. And even if that experience is painful in the moment, it'll still be like a positive experience afterwards, because like what it is that makes you suffer, and you can try to change that in your life.
Right, right.
So that's basically why they're so powerful. And
Yeah. I just want to,
that's what they did to me. Yeah.
yeah, sorry to cut you off there. I just want to like address like the elephant in the room a little bit about psychedelics because you made a video about like Connor Murphy,
Yeah.
he was like a big YouTube like fitness celebrity, and then like recently like I think he went to like a very dark place, like just
Mhm.
like have certain like psychosis, and was like even posting his personal information on like Instagram or something like that, and he was
Yeah.
apparently taking a lot of like ayahuasca. So and I think you made a video on like the dark side of psychedelics and stuff like that, so like
Mhm.
and the traps of it. So can you just like kind of maybe highlight that a little bit so that it's not all like rosy, so like just to make sure that people are cautious when they kind of like
Mhm.
step into this kind of realm.
Yeah. So what you need to be most aware of is that like what they will do is like psychedelics, they will kind of like dissolve your identity. Like the higher dose you take, the more and more it's gonna like dissolve your identity. So in the moment where like you're kind of you're like kind of like your ego is sort of like dissolving, that can be very, very painful for a lot of people, because they have so many like attachments to this body, both like obviously physically, everyone wants to stay physically alive, also like conceptually with their identity. And that's what can make it very difficult. There's also just people who just react differently to them. There's people who just have like just can't really take them. I know.
Mm,
There's all If people are predisposed to schizophrenia, psychedelics can actually bring that on faster. So you have to kind of also, I think people with antidepressants, they can't take them either. It'll end up being like a bad experience, something like that. I don't know too much about that, but what you have, like, you also don't want to be in like a setting where it's like you kind of there's like a lot of like distractions, a lot of like loud noise, with a lot of things can go wrong. Like if you're at like a party or something like that, and you're like mixing it with alcohol and stuff,
yeah.
that's like where it can turn for the worst. So when you're getting into like psychedelic work, you have to be very serious about it. You have to accept that you're going to go through a lot of experiences where with the substances, where in the moment it's going to be a very difficult experience, but you do it, so it like kind of reveals your blind spots to you. You gain insight so you can integrate them like into your everyday life.
Mm,
So you have to be willing to go through some painful experiences, and you also have to be knowledgeable just about how to use them, what doses to take, how doses affect different people. So you definitely need to do your research beforehand. But yeah, that's really it.
yeah.
And I know with the Connor Murphy thing, um, I have never seen anything like that in my life. But I heard he was like microdosing ayahuasca every 2 hours, which is like the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Right.
Um, like ayahuasca is one of the most powerful psychedelics, and I can see how why that made him so fucked up, especially like if he's like even if he has like if he's like bipolar or something, or if something's wrong, like he has some sort of disorder, like combining that with his ayahuasca every 2 hours is a recipe for disaster. And I know Psych Substance made a video with another dude about it, not on Psych Substance's channel, but on like the other dude's channel. I don't forget the other dude's channel's name, but he talked about like that's not like what ayahuasca does to a normal person.
Mm.
So um just have to be very, yeah, overall just be very cautious. Definitely don't like do anything stupid like what Connor Murphy's doing. But be like well researched. Be like very cautious about your set and setting, have the right intention, all that sorts of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I just want to share a little bit of like the
Yeah.
most, I guess, I guess like deep, profound experience that I had, and like the best combo in terms of like using
Mhm.
psychedelics. Like for me personally, what I like to do is like before, like basically have a trip sitter first of all, like have someone there
Yeah.
that you can trust,
Yeah,
and
for
then
sure.
like what I like to do is like before that, like have a little notebook, like write down a bunch of questions that
Mhm.
you have, and then I'll put like on some like make sure like I have just water, like really nice
Mhm.
premium water. Like I'm a water guy because
Oh yeah, I love
when
water.
yeah, yeah, like but I want to buy the best water I can find, and then I would just kind of like take it, relax, and then put on like an eye mask, and then just kind of like
Mhm.
sleep, and then
Yeah, that's a
through
great way to do it.
and it would like things will just come up, and then you're like, oh my goodness, like they come up during the eye mask, you just start seeing things because all the attention is
Mhm.
now internal, so you gotta
Yes.
like just like feel your sensations, and then like kind of meditate, and then put in some music, maybe like a
Mhm.
good like psychedelic playlist, and like when you open your eyes in a couple hours, you're like, oh my goodness, what just happened? Like all the memories, all the
Yeah.
imaginations, all that thing just comes up, and you're like, dude, I got a lot of things to work on, and those are just like
Yeah.
give you certain ideas, and then like what you said, the integration work, which is
Mhm.
like actually where the true I guess like changes would actually solidify, because now you
Mhm.
are aware of that, and then now you just got to
Yeah.
do the work afterwards. So just want to share that a little bit.
Mhm.
um
Yeah, that's
but
a great way to do it.
yeah, go ahead.
I was just say that's a great way to do it. With the eye mask and stuff.
Yeah.
I've never actually done that yet. I haven't done psychedelics in over a year,
Oh,
but I'm
right.
definitely gonna do it like next time. But I heard about this. I read this book about he was like a. It's called like LSD in the Mind of the Universe,
Mm.
and it's by a dude who is a former college professor, and like he was doing psychedelic work like his whole life, and then he wrote like an entire book about all of his trips. He would do like heroic doses like every time, like, and he'd be like very safe about it and very cautious about it. And he'd do like that. He'd do it with the eye mask, and he has like a whole like music playlist with like very like emotional music that's like designed to like bring out like his like the deepest shit within him
Mm-hmm,
to
mm-hmm,
help like heal him the most.
mm-hmm.
So music is very powerful to combine with psychedelic trips. That's what
Yeah.
I want to say basically.
I think the playlist that I was listening to was actually that, because like my friend told me about it, and I just kind of like, it
Mhm.
was like this research playlist just for like tripping. I was like, okay, cool. So it was like it took me
Mhm.
on a journey, man. Like it was crazy.
Wow, yeah, that sounds nice.
Yeah, and I think the beautiful like the a thing just came to me, right? Like the beautiful thing about it is just like, dude, this is all natural. It's like, how come something that is like mushroom or LSD, it's like a rye, right? It's like some sort of like
Yeah,
fungus, right? That how come it has such profound effect
yeah,
on our consciousness? So that is just so amazing, man. Like how
yeah, that's insane. It grows out of the ground and eat it and does insane things to you. That's crazy.
Right, right. And you had that like Stone Ape theory, right? Which was like a banned
Oh yeah, I made a
YouTube
video
TED
about
Talk, right?
Stone Ape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So I kind of want to flow back into like the
Okay.
ego mechanism part. So just
Okay.
now in the conversation, you're telling like how you felt really good because like you were able to help a friend be aware
Mhm.
of like her ego
Yeah.
mechanism in the relationship. So can you kind of like dive deep into that? Like what was her particular mechanism, and what are the common mechanisms so that like we could be aware of, you know?
Yeah, so the relationship thing I was talking about earlier was like my friend, he was like deciding whether he was going to break up with his girlfriend or not, and like he didn't know if he wanted to, and like I wasn't exactly like his reasoning was like very very weird to me. He's like, well, I just like want to be like free from her or something like that. It's like I just want to be free from her. Like I feel like she's like not the type of person I want to be around. I feel like she's like too like into like material things. Like I feel like her friend group. I don't. He's like I don't like her friend group. I feel like her like friends are are like not the type of people I want to be around. And like he's like I love her. I love her personally, but like I don't like everything else like around her. And he also was talking about how like she took up a lot of his time. And he's like, yeah, I was like, I'm like on like the phone with her for like 4 hours every day because it's like a long distance relationship because they like he came home because of coronavirus and she's like in LA or something like that. And he's like, yeah, it's just taking up too much time for me. He's like, I truly love her. I truly want to be with her, but I don't know like what to do about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him it's like, well, you have to be like abrupt with your decision because you're either going to cling to her, you're either going to keep clinging to her and keep worrying about it, or if you make the decision to break up with her, like just do that and don't look back. And what he did is he broke up with her, and then I think he went back with her like 3 weeks later. And when he broke up with her, I was like telling him, it's like he's like, I know it's gonna hurt right now. It's gonna hurt very bad right now because you've been with this girl for like 2 years. You know, he was like kept texting me about like how much like he misses her, how much like he was suffering because of it once he broke up with her. I told him it's like what the ego does. It's like if she was giving like things like sex, if she was making you feel very good, you know, you're gonna crave those things. And because she was your source of those things, you know, you're suffering because you no longer have that source. What she gave you, you no longer have that. And I told him before he broke up with her, it's like you have to accept that what she gave you, you're not going to have that for a little while at least in your life, and you're gonna suffer a bit because of it. He was telling me about how much he was suffering because of it. And I told him I'm basically just like just sit there like just sit there in your room and just don't resist anything that appears in your awareness. Like feel the suffering through, exhaust the suffering fully, and just don't look back. I'm like, don't look back in your decision. Like you told me you wanted to break up with her for 3 months, and I'm like, don't look back in your decision. You know, it'll hurt right now, but if you don't resist anything, the suffering will exhaust itself fast enough and you can move back faster. And then ultimately, like I think he like couldn't take it anymore. He like got back with her, which I don't. He shouldn't have done that because now he's complaining to me about the same things he complained about before. But basically, that's kind of was that's kind of what I told him, is that you're so attached to this what she gave you. You're so attached to this that the suffering is resulting because you are unable to let go of that. And like what, and I told him what you have to do to move past that is to feel the pain fully, and it'll exhaust itself and you'll be able to move back. I'm like, don't look back, but you know, he did look back and got back with her. But then he's falling into the same traps again,
Right.
which he's complaining to me about the same stuff again. He's kind of back where he was before.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if we took this case study from your friend and we extrapolate as a theme, how would this be relatable to other things that you commonly see or trends that we see in society?
What exactly type of trends?
I guess like what I'm kind of getting, it's like it's also, for example, like people that, for example, they're in a job where they completely hate, but it's giving them source of security. It's giving them some sort of like financial, I guess like, you know, incentive, or it's like even like a family member where
Yeah.
they don't want to be with them anymore. So it's like it's the same thing because it's within their comfort zone and they can't. I guess a lot of times that we seek feeling externally instead of like having that being self-sufficient emotionally,
Yeah.
right? Like I used to be very dependent on like love from like maybe my family or maybe a girlfriend, but it's
Yeah.
because of a trauma that I had within that I wasn't able to find that love within myself. So I always associated things that are like these emotions that are like, hey, I only can get them from this person or from this particular area. So
Yeah.
perhaps what I'm getting from what you're saying is that when you kind of cut those ties off, those energy cords off, it there is like that, what do you call it, when an
Mourning
addict.
process kind of.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like that's the period where we have to kind of like just feel those feelings
Yeah.
and let it pass, and then we are
Mhm.
able to be like self-sufficient again.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think like kind of like relating that like the case study that I was talking about where like was not getting like he no longer had what he had with her. Like his ego was suffering because of it. I think like I can kind of relate that to just to everyday life and just that societal trends in general, just because like, at the end of the day, like all we're trying to do, all the ego is trying to do is survive, right? And it wants all these things. It wants sex, it wants love, it wants, love from family, it wants like a good career, and it wants to do all these things basically to attain survival, attain love, attain what is good for the ego. And so what my friend did is that um this girl was giving like had a space in his heart where he was getting like his ego survival needs met. And when she broke up with him, he no longer was having that anymore. you know and I can kind of relate this to just everyday life, is because there's people who are trying to you know do things to please others because that makes their ego feel good. People will try to get a high paying job because that makes their ego feel good. They get respect from other people. I guess everyone has like different like specific things that their ego desires based on just like past experiences, um, past like traumas and stuff like that. And everyone just basically just trying to get that met. And it's like specific for each individual it's like specific for each individual, but like obviously everyone at the end of the day like wants the same thing. Have you heard of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yeah, yeah, I have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of like that. Like, of course, like everyone today has like their, like at least in like where I live, has like their most like basic needs met. So now what they try to do is, and it's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy needs basically like the hierarchy of like what the ego seeks as like your life conditions change. So what my friend did, he was like in kind of like the love esteem tier, and he was trying to get his needs
Mm,
met there, and then like he was suffering because he felt like he wasn't having that for a little bit, and then like he went back with her to try to get that back.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in your latest video, you talked about like a concept which was very, very interesting, and it was
Mhm.
talking about the horizontal and vertical kind of
Oh
like
yeah.
progression, or you said like development is the exact word
Yeah.
that you said. So you're saying, a lot of people in life, they personal development might be like, hey, let me learn a new skill, let me go,
Mhm.
um, you know, learn how to cook, learn how to play football,
Yeah.
learn the guitar, like read more
Mhm.
books on business. So that's like horizontal development, because you're getting
Yeah.
like the wide depth of knowledge and skill sets. But what you're
Mhm.
talking about is like people lack the vertical development, which is
Mhm.
an increase in their consciousness. They might not
Yeah.
learn more about like coding, but they learn more about like their ego, their spirituality, their
Mhm.
soul, and maybe perhaps the chakra, the energy. Like, so what in that video, what you talked about was like for one to kind of like transcend and to their ego, and to kind of like be liberated from the ego, is to work on that vertical development a little bit. So
Mhm.
can you kind of like just shed light a little bit more on that concept, like why, like if I'm a guy, like if I'm a student or whatever, I'm a young professional starting my career, like I'm really focused on kind of like making a living, kind of finding my life's work, finding my position, and where I kind of fill in this world. Like I have so many things that is occupying my mind already, so why should I
Mhm.
like spend time on this like vertical development?
Okay. So so vertical development is probably like the most like important thing. Like making that distinction between vertical and horizontal development was like one of like the most important things I ever learned, because you know like 3 years ago, like before I was ever into like spirituality or anything, I was reading like basic self-help books, which is like just learning like an acute skill, like I don't know, like being more like being better socially, like getting more girls or like something, or like building good habits, like working out and stuff like that, which is like we can call like horizontal development, because like you're getting more skill in like a certain area of expertise. But when I heard started when I learned about vertical development, it was just fascinating because it made that distinction between the two types of development for me. So what vertical development, it's basically just like it's like everyone has like their way that they make meaning, right? Everyone has like the way they view reality. Everyone has like their own worldview. Like various religious people have their certain worldview. Other people might have like more liberal worldview. Maybe people have like more conservative worldview, all that sort of stuff. And what vertical development is, it's like a fundamental shift in how you like see reality. It's like a change in like your like how you make meaning, like how you what your worldview is. It's like a fundamental shift. So like if you're gonna like if you're developing vertically, what you do is like you transcend like your current way of seeing the world into like a higher, like more holistic way of viewing the world, which you still have access to like the old way you viewed reality, but you now are like at like a higher elevation point where you can view reality from like a more like holistic lens. You have like a deeper understanding of the greater whole of everything, and you also have a deeper understanding of your own mind and how your own mind makes meaning. So a very like unconscious or like unvertically developed person like doesn't really know how their mind works. They kind of just whatever appears in their awareness, they kind of just go with that.
Hmm.
And they don't really understand like why their thoughts are the way they are, why their worldview is the way they are. And with vertical development, if you have like if you have like a peak psychedelic experience and like you experience reality beyond the ego, that opens you up to the fact that reality isn't just this right here. So that goes such a long way in your vertical development. And it makes you realize like I'm not this identity, I'm not this ego.
Hmm.
What really is this going on here? And it makes you really think about like the nature of thoughts. Like why do thoughts just come into my awareness? Why are my thoughts the way they are? And it really gives you a feel that when you have like a peak experience where it's like it's not just about me. This world's not just about me. I'm really in like a collective reality, and we're all trying to do the same thing here. And certain people are like more conscious than others. It's like, so how do we go all about this? People are clashing all the time. Like liberals and conservatives are clashing all the time. So it's like, why did they think the way they do? And vertical development can help explain that. And it really gives you it's basically just having a very much deeper understanding of human dynamics. Basically, that's what vertical development is.
Mm. And
Yeah.
one framework. By the way, did you come up with the concept of vertical development, or you like kind of read it somewhere?
Oh, I read it. I think I read it in the Spiral Dynamics book actually.
Right, right. So,
Yeah.
which is great because I want to talk a little bit about spiral dynamics because it gives a
Mhm.
little like it gives a framework of how to think about like okay, what are
Mhm.
the levels? So, and I from what I know, like spiral dynamics have different colors, and
Yeah.
so can you kind of like just briefly talk about each color and each level, and then how do you kind of like
Yeah. Sure.
elevate to the next level?
Okay. So Spiral Dynamics is basically just like a model of vertical development, is what I just talked about. And so I think there's 8 stages, I believe, and each stage, as I said, it's like a meaning making paradigm. It's a value system. It's a world specific worldview. So I think Spiral Dynamics, it starts out at beige, which is like basically like it's where you're at if you're like starving, dying, like you just need your immediate survival needs met. It's like you really don't care about anything else except your own survival. So like literally all you care about is just getting like water or food or something. It's not relevant to today's society. But after beige comes purple, and the Spiral Dynamics book, by the way, it like describes like how humans have vertically developed over time. So then purple is kind of like where humanity was at, where when we were in like very like tribes, like thousand years ago when we had like tribes and stuff, and only like 50 people per tribe. We were like hunters and gatherers and stuff. It's where we knew like nothing about reality. We like just had like superstitions and stuff like that. We made up things about like spirits and stuff. That's basically where purple. That's what purple is. It's not really relevant anymore to today's society. And then you have like red and stuff, and red is where it's kind of like the warlord stage, where it's like the age of like the empires. If you learn about history, where like every empire is like trying to like take over the world. It's basically just a very dominant oriented stage. It's basically like you see others as like competition. You see others as like, I want to take them over, I want to dominate over them. It's most people aren't like that today. It's only, you really only like that when you are like, you're very like low on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Basically, you still like hardly have your basic survival met, and you are just basically, yeah, that's what it is. And then red goes into blue, which blue is the basically like the authoritarian stage. So what happened in humanity's history is that religion, like like mainstream religion, basically kind of unified a bunch of warring regions, like warring red regions. So religion kind of came and unified those regions and kind of made everyone conform to the blue kind of worldview, which was often a very religious worldview. It was like Christianity, Islam, Judaism, like mainstream religion, all of that. And so that red kind of goes into blue, and what blue is, it's like you have to conform to whatever the blue ideology is, basically. And you still see that in today's world with very like fundamental religious people, like people who have very rigid religious beliefs within them, and they like aren't willing to give way with those beliefs or anything, and then they act out on the world with those beliefs, like um, you know, like people like not wanting to let gay people marry each other because it's against their religious belief, stuff like that. And then blue kind of goes into orange when people start realizing that, the blue ideology isn't all that. And so blue kind of gives way into orange, which is a very individualistic stage. And that's where kind of at least the United States is at today, with its like very emphasis on individualism, freedom of expression, rights and all that stuff. And free market capitalism and all that. And the kind of like the pitfalls of that, which is kind of like where the center of gravity of, today's society is at. The pitfalls of that is that it's very like self-oriented. It's all about me. It's all about the individual. It's not really about the collective yet. And that leads to like a lot of problems. It leads to a lot of inequality. And that kind of gives way into green, which is kind of like the social justice warrior stage, I guess you could say. And that's where people start caring much more about like equal rights and equality for everyone. And that's in the spiral dynamics model, that's like the last stage of tier one, because what characterizes tier one is that like every vertical development stage, every spiral dynamic stage thinks like their way is the absolute correct way. So like orange with like their emphasis on like individualism. And also another thing about orange is like it's very scientific, very rational. And so like they think their way is the absolute correct way. Green with like their liberalism, with their they want equal rights. They project that onto everyone else, and they want them to conform to whatever their agenda is. And after green is that you transcend into tier two, which the first stage of tier two is yellow. And that's where you start to see that everyone is different, and that by just projecting what you believe, what your worldview is onto everyone is not how you're going to like fix everything, not how you're going to fix humanity. So with yellow, you have a very deeper understanding of human dynamics. And basically you realize you develop strong like systems thinking. And basically what systems thinking is like you see reality, you see like all of humanity is like a system, and like there's a bunch of different subsystems, and that if you truly want to like make a change, you have to like do something to that like specific system. So I think an example I used in my last video was like systemic racism in the United States. And basically what I said in that video is that like, someone who basically like sees the statistic that like black people commit crimes at like higher rates than white people in the United States, they'll like take that statistic, and what an unconscious person will do is they'll take that and like use that to justify the racist ideals, but what a very like intelligent, spiritually, vertically developed like tier two spiral dynamic stage yellow person would do is they would see the system that gives rise to that, and they would try to change the system that gives rise to that. So
Mm-hmm.
in the United States, like black people, they've been affected by slavery, even though it's like 150 years past that. They're still affected by that today because they were discriminated against for over 100 years. They still are today, and they're at like the bottom of like the social economic hierarchy, and that breeds an environment in which they're more likely to break the law in order to survive. So basically, what like a yellow thing to do is like you want to change the system that gives rise to that, which would overall result in like a more like harmonious society. Basically,
Mm.
that's what a yellow thinker would do. And then yellow kind of gives way into turquoise, which I'm not like super sure on what turquoise is, and neither the book's not specific about turquoise either, because so few people are turquoise today. But basically, it's like the yogi saint stage where like you're like enlightened and stuff like that. I That's basically like the best description I have.
Mm. I see.
Yeah,
And in the
and
book
that's like
that
the last stage.
yeah, sorry. In the book, did they talk about how does one move up
Mhm.
the different colors in different stages?
It's gonna like depend on like the circumstance, but the the number one thing that is gonna move people, vertically developed people, is just having like basically it's like getting their like basic survival needs met. So I guess what you can kind of how to explain this better is that it's very in alignment with like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like I said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like whatever your like survival need is, that's like you're gonna like conform your like worldview in order to get that. So what needs to happen is that, in my opinion, people need like we need to make sure that everyone has like their like basic needs met, or else they're not just gonna be vertically developed enough to like be in like the more it's hard for me to explain this.
Right. It's like
Yeah.
if you haven't don't even have water, if you don't even have
Yeah.
like your basic needs, it's like why
Mhm.
would someone would they're in their animal instinct, they're in their
Yeah.
reptilian brain. They won't have the time
Yeah,
to
they
think
they
about
won't have they won't have the time. That's just like an aspect of it. Like you
okay,
need to make sure everyone has like their most basic survival needs met,
right.
and then that gets them to like a certain point. But then you also need to like bring in the right education for
Mm,
them too, because education is like a huge factor in vertical development. If people like aren't educated about like any like about like history, about psychology, about their own mind, they're not going to have the proper framework to just view reality from. But basically, like society will take you like whatever society you grew up in, like it'll take you to like vertically developed wise, it'll take you to wherever that like society is at.
mm,
But so to do work beyond the center of gravity society is it's very hard, because you have to go against the norm basically, and no ego wants to like be like the ego wants to conform, the ego wants to be normal. So you have to do like literal like work on yourself
right.
to kind of vertically develop more beyond the center of gravity of your society.
Got you.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, like my ego ain't normal, bro. But like I guess like that's what
Mhm.
like I'm always like a like was it non-conformist? Like the people
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
like like when the herd is going this way, I'm like, hey, that's
Yeah.
something wrong with there. I gotta that's
Yeah.
a
I
sign,
feel you.
right? Like especially
Mhm.
what's going on in the whole world right now. But I'm just curious, right? Like, how does the author know about these models? Like, did he, how did he came up with these models? Does
It's
he say in
it's
the
a
book?
model that was based on like over eight it's like 80 to 100 years of research. It was done by like multiple different people, and it's basically based on like value surveys from like different people around the world. So like they would ask various questions to like people, like all people from like all walks of life around the world. Like what does life mean to you? Like what are you occupied with? Like what do you believe in? Like what's your view on reality? What's your worldview? What occupies your mind? um Basically just like what how they view reality. They view people from all walks of life, and that's what they found from their like 80 to 100 years of research. um and they find that the the areas in the world where there's a lot of chaos, people are starving and stuff like that. They're much less vertically developed than the people in like the more developed countries, you could say. um so that's kind of where they get it from.
Yeah, okay, got you.
Value service.
Yeah. Is there anything that's like coming to your mind where you want to like flow into instead of me asking you a question? Is there anything that you want to
um
kind of like spread, like focus a little
i
more a
can't
little bit?
I can't think of anything right now.
Okay, no problems.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like, cause I just want to like bring it down to like. By the way, that model is really cool. I think by just being aware of that model, like
Yeah.
people would be like, oh, okay, well, like in terms of the color, where am I at? I would say I'm a little bit green because like I would say when I think something is right, I really want to project that because I feel like,
Mhm.
oh, this is altruistic, this is good for the world. How
Yeah.
can you not be this? How can you still eat meat? How can you
Mhm.
still use think gas is good for the natural environment? So it's like, oh damn,
Yeah.
I'm not like I could be a little bit more yellow where I have that holistic thinking,
Mhm.
just understanding that people are where
Yeah.
at the level that they're in, and like you
Yeah.
said, like understanding what gives rise to those dynamics, and how can you change the underlying root cause that gives birth to these kind of like level of thinkings, and that's where we should tackle instead of like accusing that person for being the way they are. So I
Yeah.
think perhaps like being aware of this model also helps. But I'm just curious to on like know like overall like what are the benefits, how has like spirituality and like being in this line of work has impacted you? Because especially with spirituality, I've found it's not something that it's not like instant gratification. It's not
Mhm.
something that like you can see result like physically. Like when people work out, you can like, oh, like, hey,
Mhm.
you get a little bit more sexy because your pecs got bigger. But like
Yeah.
with spirituality and personal development, it seems like a more subtle change. Like
Mhm.
it's hard to measure, I guess, right? So I guess like what keeps you going into this line of work? What are some of the impacts that that you've experienced?
So probably the biggest reason I do spirituality, and like the reason why it's like the main driver of my life, is like I want to be like a vehicle of change for humanity. And I see all these problems with humanity. There's all these wars going on, all these bickering back and forth in politics. There's all these people suffering. So what I truly want to do is I want to understand that, and I also want to be a vehicle of change for humanity as well. And most people just think of like spirituality as some like meditation, like you do some meditation, you do some yoga, or you read some Eckhart Tolle, but it's actually so much deeper than that. It's like understanding who you are and what the world is on like a fundamental level, and then in trying to live your life in alignment with that. That's basically what spirituality is. And that's what keeps me going. And it just it's like the ultimate purpose of life is spirituality and this stuff. And um yeah, it's
Mm,
I want to what I try and do with my channel is I'm trying to get a lot more people like into it, because it's so important.
mm,
And sometimes I don't even like using the term spirituality to describe it, because there's so much like baggage with that term. People like I said, people just think it's like some like hippie belief system or something like that, or it's like doing some yoga or meditation. But it's so much deeper than that. It's everything really. It's like your whole existence is spiritual by nature.
yeah, brother. Like, cause sometimes when you have those like 2 a.m. thoughts,
Mhm.
like when you maybe like smoke a little J, or like when you're like really into like that
Mhm.
deep good convo, right? You like start thinking
Yeah.
about like where did I come from? Like why is this
Yeah.
like why am I here? And I'm
Mhm.
not sure if you know Hans Wum, but like I did a couple I did an episode with him, a couple episodes ago, and he was saying how there are the different levels to dimensions, and how
Mhm.
like we just came back on the earth school to kind of like elevate to a higher consciousness
Mhm.
and to like release certain karmas to learn how to love again. And so
Mhm.
it echoed what you said at the very beginning of the show, to love other people how you love yourself, and even to like love yourself
Mhm.
more, and so that you're able to elevate to the higher consciousness, and then dimension, and eventually kind of reunite with that oneness experience that
Yes.
you have experienced in your on your psychedelic trips, right?
Mhm.
So I think it's so weird that like we're not being taught this, and but you're like it's funny how we like I was just kind of reflecting how we are so blessed to be interested in this thing, because if it boils down to the end of the life, this is what it's all about. This is why we came
Yep.
here, and
This is
so many
all about.
people are not aware of this, right? So
Yeah. So
yeah.
many people just like miss the point. Like they get lost in I don't know, chasing money or chasing sex or chasing some other form of instant gratification. But when it boils down to it, you have to really think like it's super important for everyone to think about these existential topics and really like do self-inquiry and inquiry into the nature of reality, because at the end of the day, this is what it's all about. Your existence is super spiritual, like it's spiritual by nature, and everyone should be thinking about this stuff. And that's why I make my channel.
Mm.
I make the videos that.
A beautiful saying is like you're not a human having a spiritual experience. You're a spiritual being having a human experience,
Yep, I
right?
love that saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I want to kind of move on to
Mhm.
like the golden question, right? These are the money juicy
Mhm.
questions. So my first one that I love to ask my guests is like, what is the deepest truth that you know that you like wish you learned earlier in your life?
Um, that it's, and although it sounds very cliche, it's that love is truly everything. Like if you love as much as you possibly can in this life, then you live your life to the fullest.
Mm,
And like love, it's not just like some like pleasure thing. It's not just like being romantically attached to someone. It's like it's embracing everything for what it is and accepting it and living your life in alignment with it as best as you can.
mm,
You know, trying to increase maximum selflessness and decrease selfishness. That's basically what trying to increase. That's basically what increasing your capacity to love is,
mm.
and that's what life is all about to me. What ultimately boils down to.
Right. Can you just give us a little like example or anecdote that how you're able to implement this insight, or how does a listener is able to kind of like take that insight and implement in their life?
So I guess I think a saying or a quote that I heard that probably can help best people embody this is that everyone is trying their best based on their level of awareness, based on like where they're at. So no matter like how fucked up someone seems to be or however bad someone seems to be, you know, at the end of the day, like they're trying their best based on like where they're at. So basically what spirituality is, it's about accepting and embracing and loving people and with where they're at, and also, you know, not trying to, if you're going to try to change them, not try to change them to like for your gratification, try to change them for like the greater, like the benefit of the whole, right? So if I'm going to be like a therapist or a life coach one day, my job's going to be like about like making people aware of how their ego makes them suffer, people making people aware of like their blind spots so they can live like a more harmonious life. It's not about like changing them to like whatever I want them to be. It's about just helping them become a more loving person in general.
Mm.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. And what are some of the bigger like you know what are some big questions that you're still asking right now? I know you got a lot of them, but
Mhm.
what are some of the problems? What are some of the big questions that you're still contemplating on?
um I just my biggest problem with my spiritual journey is just the ego backlashes, really. So my biggest question right now is how do I overcome that in my everyday life? And something that's helped me so much is just daily meditation. I've been slacking a little bit with that, but daily meditation is just so good because helps me keep just stay mindful. At the end of the day, it's like if I have like some selfish thought that appears in my awareness, it's like, okay, that's just a thought that's there. I don't have to judge it. I don't have to act on it. I can just choose to let it go, and then I can do my own thing.
Mm,
So that's something that's really helped me, but it's easier said than done, you know.
got you.
People who, yeah.
With your meditation, do you use any apps, or you just kind of like do it in silence?
I started with an app. There's the Sam Harris Waking Up app, which is very, very good for beginners. Has like an introductory course, like 20 or 30 days or something like that. and that just helped give me like some like techniques that are very helpful. So I recommend that if people are trying to get into beginner meditation, but I don't use an app anymore.
Got
Yeah.
you. And like, cause you're a well, like, you read a lot, you know, I'm sure you kind of read maybe
Mhm.
a book like every 2 weeks or something. I'm just like
Yeah,
guessing.
I read, yeah, probably a book every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like, what are the top three recommended books that you would like say, hey, if you're interested in spirituality and personal development, these are my top three. What would your top three be?
Okay, so I have some in my room right now. So one, I think one that's very good for just like beginners would be like any like Eckhart Tolle book. There's The Power of Now, and there's also A New Earth. I haven't read The Power of Now yet. I'm reading it right now. I'm
Hmm.
about to start reading it. I'm like
Hmm.
the 10th page or something. But A New Earth is very good because it kind of gives people an introduction to spirituality. Basically, it's like a very like base thing. You know, it opens you up to like different ego mechanisms, how your ego traps you in life, and that. And then another one that's more advanced that I recommend is The Book of Not Knowing by Peter Ralston. And Peter Ralston, I mentioned him like earlier at the beginning. He's like an enlightened master who is extremely good at communicating these topics through writing. And what the Book of Not Knowing is, it's basically like all of his all of the like every ego mechanism you can imagine that that can hold you back in life. Yeah, it's like the nickname for that book is the Bible of Consciousness. So it's like literally like set up. It's like written like a Bible. There's like verses. It's like there's like one, one, two, two, like two, two, three, two, four,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and it's it's just it's an amazing book. I don't want to say too much about it, but it's basically like you can read that book, you know, highlight your favorite parts, and you can like look back on that and be like, all right, so I'm like trapped in life here. You know, this part that I highlighted can really help me. Because I remember I read it like 4 or 5 months ago, and I like just opened up and like read what I highlighted, and I'm like, oh wow, I can't believe I forgot about that.
Mm,
It's just like a mechanism that it's like, oh, I need to not let that take me over anymore.
mm, mm,
And
mm.
then the third one, what should the third one be? Honestly, probably just the spiral dynamics book. Like learning about like a model of vertical development is amazing. It's the spiral dynamics book. It's a hard read. It's written like a textbook, but something that you can do that's probably better than reading the spiral dynamics book is listen to Leo Gura's on actualize.org's YouTube
Mm,
channel.
mm,
Listening to like the all the episodes on there.
mm,
It's probably like 8 hours long of listening, but that will open you up to the model. That's truly amazing. He
mm.
explains it in such a articulate way, and Leo is amazing.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
And so what's that one big action step? Like we talked a little bit about like, you know, loving more, having that selfless love, um, like accepting, you know, understanding like where everyone's just trying to like be their best at the level of awareness that
Mhm.
they're at. But if we have to boil down this kind of like episode, we talk a little bit about psychedelics, we talk a little bit about the eco mechanism, a little bit about your friends, a little bit about, you know, like detaching from the source and just
Mhm.
kind of be self-sufficient. And then we talked a little bit about the spiral dynamics at different levels, and a little bit about like kind of your biggest takeaway from spirituality. So if you had to kind of like boil that down, like what would you wish the listener kind of like remember from this episode? That what's that one big action step?
If I could boil it down into one sentence, I would just say, be more selfless. You know, don't live life full of self. You know, the selfish just means that's just me full of self. That's like full of me, full of ego, right? Just be more selfless. That's all it comes down to. Be more selfless,
Mm,
love more. That's
mm,
all what it comes down to. That's all what spirituality comes down to. That's all what vertical development comes down to. Basically, spiral dynamics is a model of increasing selflessness. So be more selfless. Yeah.
mm. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for doing this. Is there any where should people go find you? Like, is there any action step you want people to take? Yeah, please take it away.
Um, like we're like, sorry, like where people like an action step or like where people can find me.
Oh yeah, yeah. So
I was
is there
confused.
anything
Like,
like a place like check out your YouTube channel or your
oh
website or
yeah,
you know contact you on IG, you know, like anything that you want to kind of like lead
oh yeah.
people to.
So
Yeah.
you can follow me on on YouTube at the Curious Minds. You can also follow me on Instagram at the Curious Minds 434, and that's all I have. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that you have a Patreon kind of like tier, and I
Yeah,
think
I
like the
do.
higher Patreon tiers, like you actually do like a 30-minute call or like a 1 hour call with people, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, I do.
I think that's just a deal, guys. Like I think you should subscribe to that Patreon with Wyeth, and perhaps even like add a little like coaching element in future there, because I know
Mhm.
right now it's just like a general chat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome, brother. Like, thank you so much for doing this, man.
Thank you so much for having me. Truly a
Yeah.
pleasure.
Yeah. Okay. So that's it, guys. Episode 18, Conscious Conversation. I hope it was a great listen and a great watch from you. And hope to see you next time. Much love and
Awesome.
peace.